Welcome, everyone. So as Kenya had said, tonight's panel will be discussing loving those who leave the church. So Christ told us that the first and great commandment is to love God, and that the second like unto it was to love our neighbor. The core element of each of these commandments is love, unconditional love, love no matter what. In a church that's central purpose is the family, it can often feel isolating and even shameful to have a spouse, parent, sibling, or friend leave. It can be a dichotomy to love them for who they were, but also mourn the loss of what once was. Today, we are lucky to hear from two amazing women who have navigated these rapid waters and learned from their experiences. And I'll just throw in, I'm also in the same boat as them. We will discuss their journeys, feelings, thoughts, and ultimately how they came back to the second great commandment, to love thy neighbor. Our heavenly parents love all children the same, and we need to do the same. No one is broken, no family is broken, or rather, we are all broken the same amount. We covenant to bear burdens together with love and to treat all of our brothers and sisters in and out of the church with care, respect, and genuine love. Tonight, we will be hearing from Nicole and Meg. Nicole is in the Whitechapel ward. She's from Dallas, Texas, and she met her husband Justin at BYU after serving a Spanish-speaking mission in California. They were married in Los Angeles 3 years ago and have been exploring what life has to offer ever since. She works for Pattern, a data company that partners with brands to sell products online via marketplace like Amazon. She started as a brand manager in Utah last year, moved to London for an opportunity to start the EU brand management team. Her hobbies include calligraphy, playing baseball, and she recently decided to learn watercolor. Meg is in the Crystal Palace ward. She was born in Los Angeles, California, but grew up in a small town in Ohio. She's been living in the UK for nearly 9 years. She served a full-time mission in Lisbon, Portugal, married her husband Jared, and is now a mother to her five-year-old Alfie and 5-month-old Gwen. She works full-time as principal product designer at Skyscanner and as a private product consultant, and currently serves as Steak Relief Society secretary in the Wandsworth Steak. She loves the seaside, Mexican food, cheeseburgers, and games of all kinds, from board games to video games to Dungeons and Dragons. And I'll be tonight's moderator. I'm Sierra. I'm originally from Salt Lake City. We've lived in London for the past 8 years. I studied physics and astronomy at the University of Utah and have a master's from University College London in medical physics and biomedical engineering. I worked in cancer research and medical physics for 8 years before becoming a mom and switching gears to become an illustrator. And I now run my own business illustrating guides and maps. So Meg, we're so happy to have you on this panel. I just would like to ask if you can give us a brief background and overview of your journey to find love for those leaving the church.
Well, thanks so much. And thanks so much for that beautiful opening prayer. Really appreciated that. So I guess in addition to what I said earlier, I was raised in the church. I did all the normal things. I was baptized when I was 8 and I was Young Women's president. I was married in the temple and served a mission. I think that since about the time when I moved to South London, that's when my partner started to sort of drift away from the church. And, I was never expecting that to happen. It was not in the plans. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about kind of coming out of the other side of the feelings that I went through over the last few years and just kind of share a bit more about that journey.
Amazing. And then Nicole, again, so happy to have you here tonight. Can you also just give us a brief background and overview of your journey?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah, for the great intro. So as far as background that's relevant for tonight's conversation, my parents were both converts to the church when they were in their early 20s. They were married in the temple. They both served missions as recent converts. And they raised myself and my two younger siblings very much in the church when we were over in the US. So we were, went to primary, saying baptized when we were 8 years old, all of that, routine that we're used to. And then when I was a teenager, about 15 years old, my parents got divorced. And after that process, both of them kind of independently came to the decisions to leave the church. And so as a teenager, my siblings and I remained active. And then eventually my brother made the decision to leave as well. But my sister and I have tried to have had to navigate now this journey of our family's decisions and how we deal with that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So yeah, we're just going to dive in with some questions. So first question, it's going to be for both of you. So I'll read it out, and then I think we'll have Meg go first and then Nicole go second. So let's talk a bit about how you first felt when your spouse or parents or sibling said they were leaving and, or not coming to church anymore.
So I would say the main thing that I felt was pain. I mean, there was anger too, but, we're going to talk a little bit about the grieving process, I think, but I just felt a lot of loss. I felt really alone and betrayed and unsure. I felt like I had failed. I felt really abandoned. And I was really angry at like him and myself.
Meg, so you're frozen for the time. So maybe Nicole, let's switch over to you.
Yeah. I can jump in. Hopefully Meg's connection gets it better. But I relate to a lot of what I heard anyway of what she was saying. And for me, specifically with my experience with my parents, I was a teenager, so I had a different perspective at that time of my life than I do now necessarily. But my mom, it was quite abrupt. Her decision was very, 1 minute everything was seemingly normal, and then the next day she was kind of announcing, I'm no longer interested, and I've lost my faith, and I'm not wanting to continue. My dad was a much more gradual process, but in both circumstances, I felt I had a lot of confusion. I felt as well betrayed, and I was so aware. I felt like I was losing that idyllic, active family that we're taught to strive for. And I had so many questions about kind of what that meant for our family. What does that mean? Do we no longer have an eternal family? What does that mean for me? And what does that mean for my parents? I had so many questions and so much, just pain and sadness at that time. I was quite an independent person in general, and so I didn't necessarily myself feel tied to their choices, but I felt very aware that I needed to figure it out for myself. Was I going to follow their example, or was I going to choose a different path? And could I choose a different path to my parents? And what would that look like for my future and for the future of my siblings? So it was definitely a very confusing time of my life, for sure.
Definitely. Oh my goodness, yeah. Let me just see.
Sarah, I just got a message from Meg. She's joining soon. So if you just want to continue with Nicole, and she'll be back soon.
Okay.
And then we can
join
Meg when she arrives.
Thanks, Cynthia. Okay. So kind of going on from that, Nicole, with all of those feelings and like so many different feelings and talking about confusion and all this. Did you did you find, where did you, I guess, find support during this time, or like who could you turn to and talk to about, what was going through your mind?
Yeah. To be honest, a lot of the reason for my sort of decision to make an effort to hold on to my faith and to continue in the church was in search of that support that you're asking about. I did have quite a tight-knit ward, and for those families and ward members that kind of knew some of the more intimate details of what was occurring in our family, they were absolute kind of rocks for me at that time. I relied on them heavily to just introduce some stability in my life, and the lives of my siblings as well. As the oldest in my family, I felt quite a sense of responsibility to set an example, so to speak, for my two younger siblings, and so I kind of had to take a look around me and see other examples outside of just my parents, and think what do I want, not only for myself but also for them. And so there were definitely family members in the ward that did reach out in support that was amazing for us.
Well, that's so great to hear. And I guess, so like the other side of that question is, did you find yourself trying to discussing and supporting your parents or your sibling, like as they were making this transition, or was it something that they kind of just came to you and were like, this is what I've already made the decision, or was there any sort of communication about that?
Yeah, so I found it most, I kind of knew who I who I trusted or felt comfortable at that time reaching out to. And I certainly spoke with them and had communication about what should I do? How should I do it? How can I process what's the kind of the change in my family at the moment? But there was, I had some experiences with people that were challenging for me. Some people trying, and it was a time where a lot of people did know what was happening in our ward members knew what was happening in our family, whether I had reached out to them or not. The kind of people were aware, and a lot of people wanted. I can totally appreciate now, looking back, that there were members that wanted to reach out. They wanted to show support somehow, and I believe that it came from a place of genuine love. But at the time, as a teen, I didn't necessarily understand that or see it that way. So there were comments made occasionally about things like, I had some young women's leaders at the time that kind of told me I needed to have more faith, and I needed to have faith and continue praying. And they said, I know that your parents will come back and they'll be with you at church again. And they were trying to encourage me in that regard, but that was a challenge. I'll be honest. That was something that I felt that put a weight on my shoulders, that I felt like, am I somehow responsible if they don't? Like, if I just had more faith, would my parents make a different choice? And that was hard. I was at that time just trying to learn how to live with my new reality. And luckily I did. There were members, even some of those same young women's leaders, to be honest, who did, just reach out with things like giving us rides to and from church, giving us rides to and from mutual activities, these kind of simple acts that didn't necessarily they meant a lot to me, because I might have been embarrassed to ask for that type of thing, but it was a need that I had that they saw and were able to reach out and fill, that I really appreciated. So I had a little bit of both.
That's good. I mean, we've and the question on from that is the church, our church has a huge focus on missionary work and bringing members back. And you've touched on that a bit. So I guess, Meg, can we just have an answer from you for, so I guess the question would be, as a church that largely has a focus on missionary work and bringing members back, how did you feel about that when your partner decided to leave the church?
Well, I mean, I kind of went back and forth quite a lot. I relate so much to what you said about how, like, kind of well-intentioned members would say things like, "Oh, you just need to pray more or have more faith," or something. You know, he'll be back. Don't worry. You know, have hope. And like the missionary in me was like, yeah, you know, like he's my lost sheep, right? Like I need to bring him back. And at various points I have felt supported. So I don't want to say that I haven't felt supported by church members, because I definitely have had various church members who have made a huge difference along the way, and you know, dealt with me when I was at my worst, and just been a listening ear. I wouldn't say like the church or the ward at large generally really supported the journey that well for me, but individuals were like ministered to me, you know, like actually really cared. And I have had periods of time where I have felt very misunderstood. I have had people tell me that for years they thought I was a single mom. I have had people tell me that they didn't know what to say, or that they, you know, just ask me every week about my husband. And it's a lot of weight on your shoulders. Yeah, I think that what you said is exactly right. So I don't have that much of a different thing to say. But yeah, it felt very much like it was it made me feel even more like it was my fault, or like I was very tied to that decision, or my treatment in church was very affected by their decision to leave.
Wow. And this leads right into our next question. So from my own personal experience, when I reflect back on the time when my husband stopped coming to church, I can see that I went through the 5 stages of grief. So the first one, denial, where I'm thinking, oh, he hasn't said anything about not going to church. You know, maybe this isn't really happening. Then to anger, you know, why can't you just be the same person you are when you've met? Like this is, you know, this is inconvenient. This is, you know, not what I signed up for. The bargaining, or can't you just come to church and sit with me, hold the baby, help, you know, support me as I'm teaching a lesson. And then depression, though, like this is the worst. He's not being a good example. Who will baptize our, you know, child? To acceptance of like, this is okay. This is free agency. We get answers by asking questions. So can you, let's start with you, Meg. Can you kind of speak about your own grief process and how you've come to, I guess, acceptance?
Yeah, I mean, because it wasn't like
a big question, I know.
Yeah, it's like, it's not like it was like a cold turkey leaving either, right? So like as with many people that leave, it happened over a period of time, and you know, it depends on the person, but with my partner, he doesn't talk about it that much, and so I didn't always know like what was going to happen, or whether he was leaving even. And so there was a lot of back and forth for me, and kind of, should I hope, should I accept it, should I fight, should I, you know, guilt him into coming. But ultimately I had to process my pain, And because no matter what he decides, I can either accept it or not, right? Like I can either accept him as he is or not. And what that looked like for me was like years of therapy. So I've done like over 2 years of talk therapy, and I battled depression and anxiety. And generally speaking, I would say I've had to reframe my whole life and spiritual life. So I've had to reimagine a new story for myself that was framed around him not being in the church, and learn to see myself in that story and feel okay about it. And you know what, the only other thing I'd say is that it felt like it changed everything, and like in a way it really did change everything, but also it didn't change everything. And I think believing that it will change everything, it's kind of that baby with the bathwater problem, where you like it, I thought that like everything was over, my life was over, our marriage was over, like it was so cataclysmic that I spiraled constantly. So for me, like not now that I'm, you know, coming out the other side of that, I don't feel that way anymore, and I don't think that way anymore. And looking back, I can really see that thinking for what it was a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, I think definitely, especially when there's this ideal family, that if you're not that, then everything's broken. It definitely, yeah. So I guess Nicole, for you as well, if you wouldn't mind just kind of speaking to your own grief process, because it you know, it wasn't your spouse, it's a bit different. You have a spouse who's active, so how did you find that with your parents and siblings?
Yeah, it's definitely, it is different. There are similarities, but it is definitely a very different experience. For me, at the time, because I was still a teenager, you know, I did still have that feeling of my, like that painful grief and feeling that I was losing my family. And it was hard to, for me, it's taken a lot of time, and it's a process that that as a family, we're still not 100% figuring it out. I think we'll always kind of be navigating and learning how to respect one another and love each other regardless of our differences and that kind of thing. It was a process that for me has taken a long time to work through. But it was, I did go through that kind of grief, that grief experience of the stages you were mentioning, Sarah, the anger, the depression, the denial, and then eventually the acceptance. And for me, a lot of it came, I held a lot of, I held a grudge for a long time. I held some hardness towards my parents, feeling like let down, feeling like that at the time as a kid, they were the ones that I was kind of wanted to rely on, wanted to follow their example. And then the fact that they made a different choice was really hard for me to just to accept. And that when I was on my mission, was really, it took me that long to kind of figure out, to even recognize that was my choice, that I was holding on to that pain and that hardness, and that I actually could do something about it, that I needed to learn to forgive them, and love them for their, just because we're living different life choices, the different paths. That's still my mother and that's still my father, and we're still a family, even if we don't look like how I thought we would when I was growing up. And so kind of recognizing that I had the capacity to get through the atonement of Jesus Christ. I was able to forgive. I could do that. was a real game changer for me, in just my mentality and then my approach to the situation and our family dynamic. So that was it took time to get there, and I'm still working through that, but that's big for me.
And I mean, we can't change other people. We can only change ourselves, and it takes a lot of time to get to, people can say that, but to work through and actually make those changes and let go of pain, grief, shame, whatever those feelings are, and coming ultimately to acceptance takes a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, lovely to hear both of your experiences there. And kind of on from that, you cannot base a relationship on expecting someone else to change. Can you tell us how you are loving the person who's left right now, and what we've kind of touched on before, but like what impact their journey of leaving has had on you? And Meg, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so letting go of expectations. So one of the things that I would say I had to do is I had to like how people would make comments about you just have to have hope. I kind of had to reframe what like faith and hope meant for me in this situation. And I had to remember that and recenter my spirituality as an individual. I had to think about my covenants and my marriage covenants in a new and different way. I mean, when we make covenants, when we make temple covenants, like we do make them with the Lord as individuals. And I think that's really important to remember. And so for me, my temple marriage is still really, really meaningful. And those covenants still bring me strength. And I believe they still bless my marriage very much, regardless of the choices that Jared makes. And like, to be really frank, this is still totally a journey that we're on, and we still navigate new things all the time, and probably will our whole life together. But I think I had to put up these boundaries and walls around, okay, like this is actually just like my decision and my individual spirituality, and this is his. And I need to allow him, if I'm going to love him, I need to allow him to actually make choices and follow his heart. So like where at the beginning, I really felt this wedge, right? Like we didn't really talk much about this, but like in our house, there was like a big elephant in the room all the time. And especially on Sundays, it was really hard. I don't know if you can relate to that, Nicole, but it was a really hard day. Sundays were really hard. And, but I realized that, like if I could let go of expecting him to do anything particularly and start allowing him to choose and follow his heart, like maybe there's like actually a closeness and a love that's much deeper than anything that I had before, because I'm loving him exactly how he is with no strings attached.
I love that. Yeah, and I guess for you, Nicole, so yeah, I guess you've kind of spoken to what impact their journey of leaving has had on you. So maybe just tell us a little bit about how you find loving your parents for as they are now.
Yeah. Now it's something that is, there's still challenges that come up, but we've worked to, similar to what Meg was saying, we've worked to kind of set up our boundaries, and I know we'll get into that in a little bit, but that's really helped us be able to have an environment of where we're just trying to be mutually respectful, and that's taken time. At the beginning, it wasn't that mutual respect didn't necessarily come naturally. We, as parents and myself, we butted heads, for a long time on, but each kind of trying to change one another, and feeling like we could change one another. But I think we've now we've come to a place where we've learned and we've understood that we're different, and that's okay. And we can't change each other's decisions, but we can still, like, we can still get along. There's still so many other qualities, regardless, even though we have different religious views, different ideas about spirituality, there's still a lot of qualities that I love about my parents, and I love having a relationship with them, and I choose to value that immensely. And so that has been something that I've learned to focus on, is the things that I love, rather than focusing so much on our differences. And that's helped strengthen our relationships. But it had to kind of go both ways. We both had to learn to do that. So we were all working together for that mutual respect.
Just on the topic of boundaries, are there any like specific boundaries that either of you have set up or discussed, like specifically with your partner or parents, or are they ones that just kind of naturally formed as you're both as everyone's navigating this this change? Meg, we'll start with you.
Like, do you mean in terms of like communication?
Yeah, I guess like
boundaries?
Yeah, like boundaries and intersect this. So like what like you are willing and aren't willing to do at home. Are you praying together as a family, or what's going to happen with the kids, because for baptism or blessings or other things, kind of when the boundaries when church and non-church meets, but it impacts, I guess, the whole family.
Yeah, I think so. I have a few things to say about communication generally, but I think in terms of boundaries, I think that's something that's like ever changing, to be quite honest. Like we are changing, and both of our opinions are changing all the time. Our communication is shifting. Our ability to communicate is hopefully improving over time. And I think that means that discussion, like different kinds of discussions, can happen now that may have not been able to happen before. So a lot of times, like, things just stayed not talked about. Like at the beginning, we just kind of tried to just not talk about it and just be together, and just love each other and just focus on just being together. I think, like, as I strove to focus on just loving him and not worrying about converting him, because that's not my job, like, that allowed me to like actually just feel love, and those conversations then became much easier. Do you want me to share like a couple of thoughts about communication stuff?
Yeah. Let's move on to that.
So, like, basically in general, I would recommend, like, if you're worried about something, especially if you have like someone who is reticent to talk about their spirituality and emotions, it's always best to try and have those conversations in an unemotional setting and like almost planned, right? So keep them topic based, keep them small, keep them short, and allow yourselves to each like time out on discussion if you need to. But like, these are all, in terms of mixed faith marriages, this is not like a thing that's just for LDS people to learn, right? Like, this is something that mixed faith couples deal with all the time, and mixed faith families will have, similar needs. But I think expectations kind of plays into this. And if you learn to just ask for what you want and allow the other person to say yes or no, and then actually respect what they want rather than holding an expectation and then holding them ransom for that expectation and like feeling the resentment that comes when they don't do what you want them to do. If you can practice asking for what you actually want and need, like it becomes more of a conversation. And then the last thing that I would say is just, and this is one that we're trying to develop like lately, is more of a curiosity. So I wrote down some examples. So like you might say something like, I'm so interested in how you feel about God. Do you believe in Jesus Christ anymore? Maybe this would be like a really unemotional way to ask someone to like open up, or talk about spirituality outside of a church setting. Like, I've been feeling so good when I do yoga lately. Like, how have you found other ways to connect to like God or something bigger than yourself? And then there are like those points of conflict, right? So like, say you're talking about tithing and they really don't want to pay tithing. Ask them, have curiosity, ask them, I'm really curious, like, why do you feel that way? Can you explain more about it to me? Like, I'd love to talk to you about why I do want to pay tithing. Maybe we can come to some middle ground. But yeah, these are really hard discussions to have, especially when they involve things like money or decisions about kids. So.
Wow, thank you. Those are great examples. And yeah, I think for anyone who's going through this, it's going to be different for every person, but it's going to have to be figuring out for each relationship whether it's with a parent or child, a parent, partners. It's figuring out this communication, and when not everyone is doing the same things. Nicole, I'm just going to say, did you have anything you wanted to add on the communication side of things from your perspective?
Sure. Just briefly, for us in our circumstance, yeah, it's definitely quite different as it is, a parent and a child. But what we've kind of, we have had to have really like direct conversations. I think at the beginning we had a similar feeling where we just avoided a lot of topic. We didn't communicate directly. We had a lot of passive aggressive type communication that was happening, and that was just creating a more emotional atmosphere. But as we've learned to directly communicate, and now that we're adult, and we're all adults now in our family, and so it's changed a lot. But anyway, these days we have had direct conversations about what we do and don't want. So for example, my parents have both said that they don't want to feel preached to, right? They don't want to feel that they're returned missionaries themselves. They haven't forgotten what that's like, and so they know they get that kind of desire to convert sort of thing, but they've expressly asked, please don't share maybe like gospel related messages with me in an attempt to preach at me or an attempt to change my beliefs. And I fully understand and respect that. And then on the other side of it, I've had to ask them, what are you okay with me sharing with you? Because we talk every week, and the church is a big part of our life. And so we might have, I seem to have the desire to share with them updates about how things are going in my calling, or I gave a talk this week, or things like that. And we've had that conversation about what kind of things are appropriate for me to share with you, and just an update, a kind of scenario versus a gospel related topic. So we've kind of set up that as a boundary, and that's been helpful for us. And then kind of as we adjust to that, I'd say we've slowly kind of had, my mom just recently kind of shared, she said one of the things that she has recognized that she's missed from the church is kind of any things that are just uplifting in nature, not necessarily gospel doctrinal based topics, but just things that are uplifting. And so she actually which is a huge step. She recently asked my sister and I, like, if you do have content like videos or something that's just an uplifting message, like, feel free to send that my way. And I felt like so glad that we'd all been respectful of the boundaries that we had in place, so that when she did have a change, like that she wanted something else, she felt comfortable enough asking us for that without the fear of us jumping on it and trying to jump on the opportunity to bring her back immediately. If I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that's been our experience.
That's wonderful. So we have just about 10 minutes left of this, and I want to kind of talk about, I'll do our last question, or one of our last questions. So I found personally that, and we've discussed this as a group, that shame is what blocks us from being vulnerable. And I think in the church, there can be a lot of shame when you are not the ideal family. And our church uses a lot of language that others people, grouping people in ways. So examples of this are less active, using terms like less active, super active, non-active, part active family, or, oh, this is like the powerhouse family, they'll just do anything and be there for everyone. And these seemingly innocuous labels can group and divide as the ideal super active family, to, oh, you're relegated to a hard active family, or how do you think, I guess, how do you think, how would you prefer to be referred to and treated, I guess, by the church in general, that does tend to label and put these groups of people?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, Meg, you can go first.
Oh, I can go first. Okay.
Sorry.
So generally by the church, I would really love to be regarded as an individual. I feel like also as a feminist, I sort of like hate that there's like this assumption that the male is always the head of the household, that they're always the main contact. So there's like some policy things that I disagree with, but I think generally speaking, my value lies in my individual worth and the substance of my individual testimony and what I can offer as an individual, not as a married woman, and not as wife of Jared. And I know that that's true because I can feel it. I feel it from my heavenly parents. I know that they love me as an individual, and it's understanding and actually feeling that love that's allowed me to heal and allowed me to love Jared as an individual, and believe and trust that like it's going to be okay. But yeah, in the church there's definitely a lot of like sort of basically what I was thinking of saying is sort of like about shame is that I kind of have learned to pay attention to situations and discussions and people, and try to notice when I leave the conversation drained or I feel ashamed after speaking to someone, like ashamed of being without him, ashamed of being on my own, ashamed that I can't, keep my son quiet because it's just me, ashamed that, like that I'm having trouble juggling, 3 callings and working full time and doing church by myself, when I feel those feelings, I know that they're not what the Lord would want me to feel, and they're not part of like what the church experience should be like. So I think when we think about like how we utilize church policies and guidelines to lead and to love and to minister to others, like we should try to avoid taking actions that are based in shame or fear. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Nicole, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just really quick, I on the topic of those labels, as I remember vividly actually the first time that somebody approached me at church, as probably 6 months or so after my siblings and I started attending by ourselves. And I get it, it was a change, it was a shift. But someone approached me and said, "How are you handling your parents being less active?" And I just remember it was the first time I'd heard that word used in reference to my parents, and it was a shocking thing to hear. I just thought, what? Like it was I didn't know how to respond, and I just felt that label felt hurtful to me, and it was and they weren't there, so I understand why they used that word at the time, but it was a hard conversation. It was a hard thing to hear, and so it's made me feel a lot more sensitive to those that situation. I feel very hesitant to label anybody inactive, less active, part member, whatever. Like those types of things are personal. We don't understand the intimate details of what's going on in somebody's journey in their faith, and so it's something that I've tried to avoid putting those labels on people or families.
Definitely. And I think it's something that for me I hadn't really thought about until going through that same process as well.
Yeah.
In leading up to this, we had prepared a list of do and don't statements. So I'm just going to read them out because I think it's a helpful guide of if you see someone in your ward who's going through these transitions, here are some things from 3 women who have gone through it of maybe not to say, and I'm going to give a couple of examples of what do to say. So don't ask why someone is not there. I don't want to have to tell you why if I don't want to. I don't want to have to make up excuses. I don't want to have to keep up appearances. Don't text me and tell me you're praying for my family member who is left. Don't call them, email them, or show up unexpectedly on repeat in an effort to coax them back. Respect if they've been asked to be left alone. Don't tell me to have faith, pray harder, have hope, fast, etc., and they will come back. And then some things you can say. So do tell me you're happy to see me at church if you truly are happy to see me there, and do ask me how I'm doing. I think unless you have a strong relationship with an individual who's going through this and you feel like you could ask this question, some of those other questions, it's not that you can't ask them, but those aren't just blanket questions you can ask to anyone. You need to have a strong enough relationship that these are things they would naturally share with you anyway. Because it, like both Nicole and Meg talked about, it does bring up a lot of shame and a lot of these feelings that can be very triggering and can make the church experience even more stressful and even more isolating. So just because we go to church, we are not better than others. Christ was always with the outsiders, the sinners, the forgotten. He didn't see them as different. He treated them the same. And then the last question I'm going to have before we go to the audience Q&A is, family is the central unit of the church. Your family is the ideal family. There is no one size fit all. How have you, through your journeys, prioritized your family? Meg, let's start with you.
So like that's looked different throughout, but I think for me a lot of it is like balancing my desire to continue to be very active in my faith and actually truly supporting Jared as my partner, as a father, and as my friend. And even if we don't ever talk about his spirituality or his spiritual journey at all, it's all connected. And I don't know, for me, it's been about spending time as a family, prioritizing family time, even sometimes over attending church. Sometimes it's looked like, putting really strict boundaries around what I'm able to give in a calling, where, say if he was active, I might just be able to know he will at any need, like drop of a hat, he would just watch the kids. Now, it's like a give and take, a little bit more. And to be honest, it probably always should be anyway, but I think we take a lot for granted when we're both, like when both partners would be actively participating. But yeah, I mean, I'm sensitive to how often I ask him to watch the kids, while I do something for church, or spend hours prepping a lesson or whatever. And I just think that's like just showing respect, general respect now. This is kind of like how I see it. But yeah, that's how I've prioritized my family. And I think also like finding ways for us to make connection emotionally and spiritually as a family, doing things that aren't churchy, being in nature together, going on walks, playing games together, like things that you would do in a family home evening, like, and again, I think that will look different as like time goes on. Like we'll have different ways, we'll find new and different ways. And yeah.
Lovely. Nicole?
Yeah, for me, it's been a lot of just trying to understand them, trying to make sure that I'm making an effort to speak to them. Obviously, right now my parents live in a different country, so my husband and I have to, put forth effort to make sure that we're maintaining those relationships and understanding what their lives are like and what's important to them, what they love, what makes them happy. And trying to support them in that. I'm now expecting my first son in August, and he'll be the first grandchild on both sides, my family and my husband's family. And we absolutely want my parents to, be involved and have a active role in our son's life. But we'll, need to figure out some boundaries to set up to kind of protect the standards and values and that kind of thing that we want to teach our child. But that doesn't mean that we don't, like, obviously my parents are already love him and are excited for that. So we'll prioritize that family relationship, and just have to navigate, the details of what that looks like. But yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing so much, and yeah, just sharing your stories and kind of this whole process. So we're going to go to some audience questions. So the first one is, how do you lovingly support the choices of your loved ones when they may disagree or affect your own personal decisions? And I think maybe Meg, that's a good question for you.
Again, like I think a lot of this is about navigating like those waters together. So I don't like, I'm not going to share like details, but let's say there's something new or different that we need to talk about together, or that like I personally feel really affects me. I think how I'm trying to approach it is like do a bit of processing on my own of my own feelings so that I can come to the table with him in the least emotional way possible and express what I want and what I need, like the pain that or problems that are arising because of a choice that he's making, and what I'd like to see or boundaries I'd like to set for us, and just generally like allow him to share like what's going on in his on his side. Because if you come like at it in a really kind of emotional and angry way, or when you're in that pain, it's really like it doesn't invite a conversation, it doesn't open things up and allow them to tell you how they feel, or what's going on with them. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, so definitely like just having to process it yourself first. And I love that, like just not coming to the conversation with all the feelings you're feeling initially, and just taking time to process. I mean, I think that's
Not
good
perfect.
advice in all, I think in all marriages for many things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not perfect at it at all, and there are definitely times when I have like explosions of emotion.
We all do.
I think it's really normal. Like luckily he's really different from me, so like he brings me down from that pretty well, so hopefully it's okay.
Great. Okay, so the next question is for both of you. So you've spoken about the reimagining of your story. What tools did you learn to be able to do this and live in this new reality? So I guess, yeah, tools and maybe groups or other things that you maybe have done. So Nicole, we'll start with you.
Yeah, for me, as far as tools, I looked a lot at I looked for examples, and that's hard because you can't always find an example of your exact scenario, because everyone's kind of situations are different. But I did, you know, try to look at other families that I could at least relate to some element of their situation, and use those examples to kind of help reshape my vision of what our future would look like as a family, and just get that kind of by using those various examples that I had around me, I kind of pieced together what I thought we could achieve. So yeah, that's something I found helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Seeing examples is like, I think even if you can't find your exact example exactly, it's like finding others who are thriving in an atypical environment. And also just generally for me, accepting that actually atypical is typical, that like there is no typical, like kind of letting go of this notion that there is like, that there is an ideal, like, because actually I still consider my family an internal family, and like receiving blessings and being blessed by the covenants that I've made and through the priesthood. So like I feel like I've had to sort of shift how I think about what is typical. Another tool, just like I'm just going to throw a few out there, like definitely therapy. Like I cannot say enough like how much therapy has helped me, actually being able to speak that story over and over, speak it enough times that it was true for me, like, and rehashing it enough times that I could say it without being overwhelmed by my pain. Like, it was a process, and it was, yeah, sometimes you have to pay someone to validate you for 2 years. But like, it really, really helped me. And the other thing I would say is that, like, and this is again, it's a kind of a finding examples thing, but there's, for anyone going through a mixed faith marriage situation, there is a Mormon mixed faith marriages Facebook group that is fantastic. And there are people there that have been mixed faith marriage for like 20 years. And there's like therapy Tuesdays, and there's like so many resources there that are fantastic. And examples of families that are like thriving, not just surviving, but like thriving in mixed faith marriages. And it really gave me hope. Like, it made me feel like, okay, it's going to be okay. Like, I can do this too.
Yeah. Okay. So this will be the last question. So how do you think, as the church, we can normalize talking about these experiences? I know from my own personal example, when we all sat down and talked together, Meg and I, who also had known each other beforehand, when we were sitting down, we did not know we had a shared experience, and it created a kind of bonding experience. So people who are in your ward and see you every week when going to church in person was a thing might see what's happening, but on those who are not in those circles, they might not know, and there's not really opportunity to talk about these things with people. It's kind of just not spoken of. So how do you think, as church members, we can find people who, or like maybe not find people, but like normalize talking and not feel shame? Yeah. Nicole, any thoughts there?
It's a hard one, to be honest with you, because what we're talking about are really, personal and challenging experiences that sometimes we don't share for a reason, because we aren't in a place where we want to share that experience, or we're not we're not, some maybe we haven't like emotionally processed, or we're not ready to share that experience. So there are reasons why I think that some of those things are just kept sometimes more private. But I completely agree that the strength that can be found from kind of sharing those experiences is quite powerful. And the more that we do share with one another, the more that we'll realize what Meg said is absolutely true, that the atypical is typical. So as a church, what can we do? I suppose it's all kind of, for me, coming back down to that principle of loving those around us. Genuinely showing support when somebody is brave enough to share is, crucial. Not making them feel like the isolated, or the odd one out. Not making them feel like that, because we all have unique struggles and challenges that we're going through. So yeah, the more that we can just be brave and share with those around us, and then love those when they do, is the best I've got now.
Meg, anything you want to add?
There's like so many things, but I just think, like, if we generally, it's about inclusivity and like intersectional inclusivity. Like, so I think every member can make a big difference in this. Just loving how Nicole has just like highlighted, like being true ministers to those around us, and creating real community. I mean, when you love someone and grow a relationship with them, and grow to understand them, like, becomes very natural to talk about what they're struggling with, and how they're different and unique in their needs, and that becomes really natural. But also, as a leader, like specifically as leaders and teachers, we can be more intersectional. We can consider who we invite to make comments and share their experiences, we can get to know the people that we teach and love them and value their unique situation. And it will make it better. It will make it like exactly what it needs to be for everyone, which is a place to be safe and loved.
Yeah, I love that. Could you, Meg, just tell us the name of the Facebook group, and then we'll share. I think we're going to share. We can share it after the session, the like name of it. But can you just say?
You know, I don't know if they've changed the name. It was Mormon Mixed Faith Marriages, but what I can do is I can highlight this to the leadership, and
Perfect.
hopefully they can list the link. I know that it, just for information, it's a closed group, so you would have to like do all the things to apply to it as a member, you know, but it's, I mean, there's thousands of people on it, so like I'm sure you'll be able to get in if you need that support. I fully endorse it. So.
Perfect. Well, thanks again so much for being so vulnerable and taking the time to have this, I think, really important discussion that's just not had often in the church. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, hand it back over to Kenya.
Thanks, Sierra, and thank you so much, Nicole and Meg. We're so grateful for everything that you shared with us, and especially as you've expressed that this is a journey that you're continuing through. Really grateful for that vulnerability that you shared, and I'm sure we've all taken things away that we can do to apply that unconditional love. So thank you so much.